Welcome to No Question About That, talking about Manchester United 1, Arsenal 1, and the protests that happened at the weekend. Real Sociedad to come on Thursday with Daniel today. How's it going, Daniel?
I'm all right. How are you?
Doing all right. Early in the morning here. So,
True that.
all of that. True. Got to wake up.
Can I start actually with a public service announcement?
Oh, yeah, always.
So a friend of mine went to the gym the other day. He's driving home and they do the stretching, and then he realizes during the stretching he's gone from being hot and sweaty to shivery and sweaty. Feels a bit nauseous, thinks over exercise. Drives home, starts getting chest pains. Opens the door, says to his wife, "I'm having a fucking heart attack here." Call an ambulance. She calls an ambulance, and they say, "Don't worry, it's a panic attack. We'll be with you in an hour." From on the floor, he shouts, "I won't be here in an hour. I'll be dead." He's a doctor.
Oh, you should know then, yeah.
He's a doctor. So they turn up in 5 minutes. They're going to take him to one hospital. He says, "No, don't take me there, take me there." And turns out it was a proper heart attack and he's going to be fine. Had an emergency stent fitted. But I think, for me anyway, this is useful information. Shivery, sweaty, nauseous. Those are the things you want to look at for when you might be having a heart attack.
And well, Daniel, at our age, we got to think about these things, haven't we?
Absolutely. I was 46 this weekend.
Happy birthday.
A weekend where I used to never have to worry. Well, not worry, but think about what the football was, because it was always FA Cup quarter-final weekend. And I don't know, I quite like that. And now they've taken it away from me. But yeah, so things like, exercise, sauna. If anyone wants any exercise programs, I know I don't look like I'm good for that kind of shit, but I've got some good ones for I'm obviously, as you might imagine, not into muscles and shit like that, but I am into obsessions and I am into sensory experience of all kinds. So if anyone wants any kind of cardio program or core program, hit me up and I'll give you what I do. I mean, obviously, as you look at me,
right.
It doesn't look like it's doing anyone any fucking good. But
did you see that Arnie movie from the 1980s? I forget what it's called now. Where he's going about, got to get the pump on. Got to get the... No, it's that body.
No, that was a joke. That was 90s as well, Kindergarten Cop. I didn't, but I learned about getting your pump on from Geordie Shore, I think. Where before they went out, they do some chest expanders or whatever.
Do you
remember them?
All right.
Do you remember the chest expanders? Do you know what I'm saying? They look like the worst thing to. They look like some kind of sex toy, basically. For catching nipples.
Sure I was trying to work out how you could use that in that activity, but yeah. All right. Well, what order should we talk about this in? I guess before the game there was a mega protest called by the 1958 group, who've done very well to kind of rally fans around a single activity over the last few years. It looked like thousands of fans attended the march. Big protest outside. We've seen this for 20 years. I guess the question is, does it work? What did we think of it? Will it have an impact on Big Sir Jim and the cave dwellers in Florida?
I guess they don't. I mean, the Glazers don't care. I mean, it's very clear that they're not bothered, or at least not bothered enough. Big Sir Jim is a little bit different because he's bought United as a vanity project. Feels like he wants his epitaph to be the bloke that made United great again. So, I mean, obviously he's a Brexiting Tory billionaire polluter. So he doesn't really care that much about other people. And in order to get to where he's got to, you have to be impervious to most shit. But at the same time, the whole away end at Fulham, for example, and he's there singing Jim Ratcliffe's a cunt. You'd think that would register in some way. Yeah. And the problem that we also have, though, is we say he's a legacy purchaser. So in theory, this isn't what he wants. He wants to be a hero. But people like him don't like admitting that they're wrong. And so the question isn't just, will he listen and at least say lower the ticket prices? Seems unlikely he's going to stop the redundancies. The ticket prices feels like an easier win. Is there a way he does that without it looking like a climb down? I don't know, because it doesn't seem like the sort who's all that keen to climb down.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be very soon, won't it? I mean, typically it's been around now when ticket prices have been announced for the next season because they'll want to collect the money before the summer for cash flow purposes, especially these days.
As much interest as possible.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, it's cash flow is lumpy. They do try and even it out, the Premier League, by spreading the payments across the year. But typically it's been around now that ticket prices have been announced, and I think everyone's just assuming there'll be a fair jump because United are looking for every incremental piece of revenue or cost cutting at the moment. And I think you're right. I mean, Jim's looking at this as a legacy, and he's already become the thing. He was supposed to be the savior, but he's become the thing that everyone hates, right? He's kind of mixed in. And I know, we've talked about it in detail and plenty of nuance on this here podcast, but he's become lumped in with the Glazers, one and the same. And in fact, in some ways, he's their kind of PR front end, isn't he? And that's the risk for him in terms of legacy. Does he care? I mean, he doesn't need to. He's got plenty of fuck you money. So, but he's, as you say, he's bought this for vanity, and he wants to be the thing that the person that saves United. He just thinks the way to save United is by cutting costs to the bone.
Which is a classic Tory way of doing stuff. And we know it doesn't work.
Not for football, it doesn't. I can't name a club. I put this out on Twitter, actually. Can you name a club that's managed to cut their way to success? And the examples given were
Liverpool, Stanley Knights.
Yeah, no. But they were things like, they're more like, clubs that behave as if working on a budget is their modus operandi. So Brighton or Dortmund, that kind of thing, or Real Madrid, who went through this period of not spending any money and just getting freebies, but they're just all different contexts. United aren't going to go get Mbappe on a freebie.
But also right now, Dortmund and Brighton, they spend money.
They do spend money, yeah.
They spend money, then they make money. They speculate to accumulate people, Brighton. The speculation, they try and take the chart, they try and make it as unspeculative as possible by having Tony Bloom's algorithm, that whatever it is, that are good scouts that help them find the players. But they're not doing it on the cheap. They're paying money that looks cheap because they're getting good shit for not a lot, if it turns out to be good. But this is not cost cutting. This is spending. Bournemouth as well. Bournemouth have got rich owners. They spent loads of fucking money, and they've done a really good job of it. And then they hired a great manager.
Yeah. So this is the model, isn't it? Right? You spend the money you can. You spend it as wisely as possible, which United have not done over the last 20 years. And you have, the business model of revenue, match day revenue, commercial and broadcast, right? And or transfer market if you played that one as well. And United have done the transfer market piece extremely badly, and as a result, all the other revenue streams have dropped, except match day, which is about even. I mean, the UEFA landscape report was out this week, and it gives quite a lot of detail on the revenue models, and United are still one of the highest on match day throughout Europe, but that's because of the size of our stadium and the consistency of the crowds. Per seat is actually quite a bit lower than some of the rivals. And, when Sir Jim said, I don't see why Old Trafford should be cheaper than Fulham, I'm sure he's looking at that and going, how come Paris Saint-Germain can charge twice as much per seat as United, and what can we do here? And it'll be interesting to see what the split is between sort of general ticketing prices, which they've gone for this season, with the £66 ticket, and executive seats, and whether they try and turn more seats into exec seats or with hospitality and so on and so on and so on. And that will be part of the thinking behind the new stadium as well, because suddenly you can have most of those new seats executive in some way and charge more per seat. And so, I know it's all kind of bundled into one. When there's a protest, it's about debt, it's about ticketing, it's about management of the club and all of that. But these are the things that the club are bouncing around at the moment. And I mean, it'd be interesting to see. The Glazers in the past have announced things quite late. Didn't they make one of their big announcements about ticket prices after the season had ended? I mean, it's unusual.
I mean, I think presumably it comes because you're waiting for a good moment to do it. And there probably wasn't one. So, question.
Yeah.
I can't see a way, and correct me if I'm wrong, that cutting staff like this, like, let's forget the moral issue for a second, and United's duty of care to look after local people that want to come and work for the club and have worked for the club, a lot of them for a long time. Forget that for a second. Obviously, we're not forgetting that at all. But in terms of just this question, how much actual money to spend on players are United going to have as a consequence of this fucking bullshit? And is there an alternative, say, issuing more share capital or something that then means Ineos or Big Uncle fucking Sir Jim put money in?
Yeah, well, two answers to that one. It's going to save all the cost cutting. It's going to save about £50 million a year. And so United's wage budget, which they now don't split out. They did 2 years ago in that UEFA landscape report I mentioned. They split out the wage budget from the overall wage budget, the player wage budget from the overall wage budget. A bunch of clubs complained, and so now they don't do that, but we can make a guesstimate, right? And it looks like United's total wage budget this year will be 180, 190 million or something like that, and they're trying to get that down to 150 million. And they're taking out 50 million of normal people staff costs, right? And other costs through using agencies and so on and so on and so on, right? So it's about 50 million saving a year. It looks like something like that. How much do we have to spend? Well, they guided about 140 million EBITDA. That will not be the case if United aren't in the Champions League. So that's free cash flow, but no Champions League, and our only option is winning the Europa League. We'll go on to that later. Will mean a large reduction in the potential revenue that can be applied. So that's one piece of it. And then the other thing on spending is that we owe about 200 million euros this financial year, 170 million pounds or something like that, right? So there's capacity to spend and ability to spend, right? United had 15 million pounds in the bank in cash. So without an additional injection of money, they're just not going to be able to spend
15 million pounds, is that it?
That was it in the last quarterly report, 15 million pounds. Now they can spend on the line of credit. They have this line of credit that they've been using from the Bank of America, which charges a really high interest rate. So interest rates this financial year were about 60 million, 24, 25 of which were the main debt, the Glazer debt that's been there for 20 years. The rest of it was the Bank of America line of credit, which was used to buy players for Erik ten Hag, right? So it's really expensive. So Jim just can't put more capital in and it be applied for PSR purposes. Now, the other piece he can do, because you asked, could there be some kind of injection? They could swap debt for equity. So, but this would be on the Glazers to decide whether they are willing to sell more shares to Jim, to pay down some of that debt. And owners can do that at any point. If they turn it into a loan, there's an interest rate applied now. That was in that was a big thing that came out of the Manchester City court case.
Yeah, because of loan. Because then it's just you loan, and there's nothing to stop you from doing it, right? You can just keep loaning if you're richer than God.
Exactly. Which is what Abramovich did at Chelsea for a decade, right? He loaned them £1 billion at 0% interest rate and charged himself £1 million to sit in his own seat. Brilliant stuff. Brilliant. So Jim should do that, by the way. Yeah, his seat, £1 million and all the Glazers. So he could do that. They could swap.
But you couldn't do £1 million for your seat. Could you do that?
That's what Abramovich did. Yeah.
But could you do it now if they tighten the rules?
I don't know if they've tightened the rules around that one. So, I mean, it's like incremental stuff. The big one is, could you take £700 million of debt and turn it into equity shares and give Sir Jim another 15% in the club or something like that? Now, you could, but the Glazers have behaved in a way that they just want it in their pockets. They don't want to do that, right? They want as much money in their own pockets as possible. I mean, he put money into things like, he put that £80 million in that was not going into their pockets in the last quarter. That went into infrastructure projects. Carrington, in fact, actually some of it was just operating cash for the company. So he could do that, but they seemed very reluctant to do that. Now, the enterprise value of the company overall reflects the debt anyway. So at some point, that debt, that £700 million, if there's a full takeover, that's going to be reflected in the price that they get anyway, right? So it's not magic money that they're losing. It's just when they want it. So there is stuff. There's a long way of saying there's stuff that Sir Jim could do, but it's mainly on the Glazers to decide.
It's not as fun as firing working people, though, is it?
No, definitely not. If you're an old Tory like Sir Jim, he probably gets a lot out of firing the minimum wage catering workers. So
doesn't give you that
off at night.
That surge of carnal excitement.
He can take Viagra or he can fire some catering staff. One of them's going to give him a boner for sure. Anyway, so all of this is rolled into the fan protest. Will it make a difference? I don't know. When fans broke into Old Trafford after the Super League was announced, they got that game against Liverpool cancelled. The Glazer family turned up for a fans forum once, and then didn't again. Basically,
but didn't people get their collars felt for that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people were arrested or prosecuted.
I think they did, and I don't seem to recall the club saying, "Do you know what? Leave it."
This is Manchester United under Glazer ownership. They don't give a toss, right? And so this is not a cynical way of me saying, "Oh, it's just not worth it." I do think there's a the two-pronged strategy of Must being the serious people in the room, trying to have the conversation about the club, even the club treats them with suspicion. The Liverpool supporters, a similar supporters group, do the same with them. I remember reading an interview with them, Spirit Shankly, who said, they treated us like we were the enemy, but over the years we got certain things. So there's that one, and then there's the more kind of militant side of things. You remember the Men in Black? Everyone was dressed in black on Sunday for this one. Broke into Rio's house and had a word with him about his contract and all of that. At which point
I do remember
he was
that.
like, "Yes, you've got a very good point, lads."
He actually handled that not bad. I think he came out.
No,
didn't
he was all right.
He didn't hide.
Yeah. Unlike Ed Woodward, who pissed himself over a few fireworks. Although family in the house and all that, I'm not suggesting violence is the answer. So will this two-pronged strategy work? I don't know, but pressure, keeping it in the news. I mean, even just this week, we had Tim Howard claiming on TV that the Glazers spent billions of their own money into the club. I mean, there's just such a lack of knowledge and education in the pundit class and even amongst serious journalists that you've got to keep it in the news and keep this message going, I think. So touch wood, it has some impact. Yeah. All right, let's get on to the game. United 1, Arsenal 1. You know what, Daniel? I thought this wasn't bad. I mean, I know it's context, right? In the past,
it was.
It
was bad. Yeah. It wasn't the level to which we've become accustomed.
No, right. First half, extremely passive, and you're like, Arsenal had 70% possession, and United weren't really doing anything. I'm like, can you run? Can you kick someone? Can you do anything? Can you start fight? Anything. Second half, I thought it was much better. I mean, I know we scored in the first half and conceded in the second, but second half, we were 4 or 5 really good chances, creating stuff, proactive, aggressive, felt good.
Yeah, agree. The first half, as you say, was dreadful. Although they defended the box fine, and we saw why Arsenal, not just why Arsenal didn't win the league this season, but also why they didn't win the league last season. Yeah. And I know they've got injuries now, but the thing that ruined it for them last season was ultimately lack of attacking class. They drew a few games, not many, like Leeds. They drew with Leeds last season. Maybe they drew Newcastle. They drew enough games where it felt like that is enough games to stop you winning the league, because really you've only got one serious game breaker, which is Bukayo Saka. If he doesn't do it, then all these other players, your Martinellis, your Trossard, your Havertzes of this world, they're not rubbish, but they're not better than squad players in a serious team.
Yeah. Well, look, they were offered Ollie Watkins in the winter. Villa had to get rid of one of their forwards, John Duran or Ollie Watkins. They had to, because they've spent too much. They were offered him for 60 million. They offered 40, and they didn't get him, and it'll cost.
Oh, was that what happened? I thought that Villa were annoyed that Arsenal offered. Was that not the case? I haven't followed this. this one.
The Arsenal fan TV people were saying that it was the other way around, that Villa came out first and made the offer. So who knows? That is the story that seems to have
60 million quid for Ollie Watkins. I mean, I have sympathy with Arsenal for that one, that they needed a centre forward and they knew they needed one in January, but there wasn't one that they thought they could get that they actually wanted but was worth the money. So they didn't get one. I don't think they'd be about to win the league if they'd have got one. So it looks bad, but it feels ultimately, I mean, only if they get the right player in the end, but that feels like a fairly solid decision on their part. And the thing that the reason they've got these players, one of the reasons is they bought Trossard because they were close to winning the league the year before last, and they knew they needed another player, and they ended up getting him. And it wasn't actually, and it was sort of almost what they needed, like a multi-purpose forward who won't get in your strongest team, but if you put him in a team, it'll be okay. And he's, I would say, not quite good enough at that.
I mean, for the money, he's that kind of player. He's a good quality player, but not a 30-goal a season player. So there's one other thing I think, and it feels to me, and I'm saying this without loads of evidence, that they've become a bit more conservative in how they play as well. And Arteta has become more and more concerned about their defensive side of the out of possession, their defensive side of their game, than the attacking side of the game. And they're trying to not concede their way to the title. And it doesn't look like that's going to work, because Liverpool have scored, 10, 15 goals more than them this season.
So that, I think that, I don't know, because this is a bit of a chicken and egg situation. That is it that actually he knows that they don't have the firepower really, so they've had to focus on that stuff rather than from the outset. Because it might be that he's got that, as you kind of get closer to winning stuff, sometimes you find it more with managers as they get older as well, and they're thinking about legacy. Sort of Fergie, sort of Wenger, they become more cautious because it gets more and more important, so that they want to make sure they don't lose, and then assume that something will happen with their attacking players to make sure that they win. And so that might be part of it, that if he's thinking if Arsenal don't lose, then they should win most of the time. But also it feels like that was just what they had to do, because they don't have the firepower, so they have to make sure that they're proper solid at the back. And I mean, they're good at the back. I don't think, I'm not watching them, and I saw like, people talk about Gabriel in particular like he is of the level of the best defenders that we've seen in the Premier League era. And I mean, I think he's a good player, but I don't see that in him.
He's not a Vidic or Rio, I don't think. The attacking side of Arsenal's game, where they created a lot of chances and created a lot of shots against United on Sunday, we still out XG'd them on 33% possession.
And we don't say that very often, do we?
We do not. We do not. And the XG on Højlund's shot that didn't happen near the end of the game was 0, of course, because the bloody guy doesn't shoot. Open goal. Shoot. But he wouldn't do it.
It was,
I know.
I had some sympathy with him there, that he's obviously got it. And it is a bit of a confidence thing. And he's thought, I must score this. So he's trying to make sure. And it is a really good tackle.
It's a really good tackle, but I think a striker who anticipates the tackle coming in takes it away to his left foot, his stronger foot, rather than the other way. His lack of anticipation of the tackle, as much as the brilliant tackle that ruined that one. But I mean, the point is, United create some good chances here, but for David Raya saving Mazraoui's shot and the header, De Ligt's header near the end, and a couple of others, Arsenal may well have lost this game. And in the end, they needed it much more than we do. And we're not going down, and the best we're going to finish is like 11th or something like that. We have a really strong finish to the season. So they needed it. We didn't, and they shat the bed in the end.
I thought, actually, and I know he didn't play that long, but I sort of felt like Højlund was a little bit better in this game in the time that he was on the pitch. What's he doing with his hair, by the way?
Yeah. What are they all doing with their hair?
Is he doing like a sort of, he's trying to get an Anthony Gordon almost, where he looks like Joey Boswell?
I don't know.
Check out Bread, younger listeners.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but yeah.
I know you know.
I'm of the age.
Where
Soaps
the
from the
theme
80s,
tune, the
90s.
theme tune that the Beach Boys wish they'd written.
Yeah. I feel sorry for the guy. I mean, in a way, he was asked to step up to a level he's not ready for. And we've seen glimpses, haven't we? I mean, he had that burst last season where he scored, 6-6 or 7-7, something like that. But apart from that, it's been really, really sparse. And this is 19 games without a goal now. Might even be more than that now.
I think that might be 20 now.
Yeah. And Josh Zirkzee has got, 1 or 2 in that time as well. He offers something, but it doesn't look like a striker to me. He was back at number 9 in this game. Garnacho is probably our best attacking player. I mean, constantly
but
running and moving.
They all had some moments. Like there was the Zirkzee flick. Yeah. There was some passes. I mean, he has improved. We can't say he's not improved, Zirkzee, over the last few times as he's played regularly and got used to the pace of it. And it's not me saying that I think he's good enough. He probably isn't, but he's not useless, I suppose.
There's some qualities there. I just don't know. He's definitely not a number 9. He's just not going to score enough goals.
Even the one he scores in midweek, I mean, a semi-competent goalkeeper saves that.
Well, it's right in the middle. It's literally in the middle of the goal.
And he's managed to go away from it on purpose first.
Something, I guess. I mean, before the game with Eriksen, Casemiro in the side, I'm looking at that and going, oh, God, because they were beyond dreadful against Newcastle. It was the other way around. Eriksen was further forward and Bruno's in the centre, which gave Casemiro, I think, a bit of extra support. Amorim said after the game, this is the kind of game Casemiro's good in. The low block, he said, we won't always play in a low block. I know fans don't want that. But to me, that suggested that he's like being a bit more flexible. I mean, we've had a few games where he's done this against the better sides. City, Liverpool, Arsenal in the Cup, Arsenal in the league. We've done this, and clearly, I mean, that's how he beat City in the Champions League as well. They scored 4 goals on about 1 XG and 20% possession in that game. So he's prepared to be sort of flexible around his system when he needs to be. He changed it around a bit in this game. He spotted that Casemiro is good where there's not a lot of space, and same with most of our defenders. I guess Lenny Yoro being the exception, who is prepared to defend in big spaces and was all right until he had to go off. Yet another injury. I think that's 9 we've got now.
I mean, he himself has had 4 or 5.
Yeah. It's concerning.
I mean, he looks a good player though, Yoro. And I mean, part of the reason I think for the box defending is probably just the players that we have. Like De Ligt is a good box defender. Maguire also is a box defender. I mean, I know they didn't play yesterday, but I think the flexibility is always. I mean, he was always kind of clear that the idea is the reason that he's devised this system is for it to be flexible. That this is how you create. If you have this formation, you have overloads. And obviously, you want different personnel for different situations. And in theory, that's what's meant to be here. But I mean,
how did you feel about Victor Lindelof striding into midfield, Rio-like, because he was the spare man?
I found the fact that he was in the team not unannoying. Like, I just never want to see that fucker again. And that's even before he manages to balls up that penalty the other day.
273 games for United, Victor Lindelof. Now, I can't remember a standout one. I can remember plenty of dreadful games, but a standout.
Well, yeah, the standouts. Yeah, they were still standouts, but yeah, I agree.
The wrong way. Yeah,
he doesn't have the physical qualities. Doesn't even matter what else he does. Even if he was better at the stuff he's not better at. If you're slow and weak, Premier League centre back, you are not really, unless you're special in other areas. So Martinez also has those problems, but he's aggressive and he's a great passer and he can run with the ball. So you say okay, and he's a leader. He's a bit of a brute. Whereas what Lindelof doesn't give you those kind of intangibles. He just
not in the slightest.
He's just a cabinet.
There's nothing.
It's a wet lettuce.
Yeah. He'll be off in the summer. He's out of contract. There's no chance they're going to offer him a new contract. What do you think of Ayden Heaven? He had 45 minutes. Didn't look out of place. Good passer of the ball.
I've got a song.
There's a few of them going around. Go on.
Oh, baby, do you know what that's worth? Ayden Heaven left the town of his birth. He loves Man United, and that comes first. Ayden Heaven is the best on earth.
When you were 14, Daniel, did you think Belinda Carlisle was hot? Go on, admit it. Admit it.
Was I 14? It was a little bit. I remember I had Now 20, I think, had Live Your Life Be Free on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, I was like, who was the other ginger who was around that time? Tina Hobley, who was a barmaid in Corrie. And what's her name? Isla Fisher. With a kind of...
she's a bit old. More recent times, right? But yeah.
She was...
do you think you could get 10,000 lads from Salford singing Belinda Carlisle in the Stretford End?
We got them singing Agadoo.
That's true.
that comes from my little group.
All right. Well, good luck. Good luck spreading that one, Daniel. We'll see if it happens.
If you think, and then you see, have a look. There's the song that Celtic had for Scott Sinclair. And you see them sing that one. It's to Abracadabra, not Abracadabra, the lyrical can't remember the name of the song. Scotty Sinclair, he is fucking magic, lyrical.
Yeah.
So it's quite complex, that one. So I think it possible. That's what I was saying.
Right.
I think it possible.
I think he needs a few more games before he gets a proper song, though, doesn't he?
But his name's fucking Ayden Heaven. What can you do? Ayden Heaven. There's Ayden Heaven. Is that Fred Astaire?
Yeah.
Ella Fitzgerald's, I think that one might be. When we're off together, dancing cheek to cheek. So, Ayden Heaven. It looks very good so far. What I liked about him that I found reminiscent of Rio is that he's really wide shoulder to shoulder. And that makes it quite difficult to kind of get around and across him. And I mean, we saw that he's confident on the ball. He's left-footed, which is nice. He can defend the space. He's fast. He's tall. He can challenge. He's good in the air. Like you can see that all the natural materials seem to be in place for him to play in that left centre back position. That we haven't seen whether he can pass through the line so much or the long passes, but given he's come through the system at Arsenal, and just that's how people play football nowadays, he probably can pass.
I think it's probably a good part of his game from what I hear of all the reporting. And Amorim was very sort of effusive in his praise afterwards, which is not really him, but he said, yeah, we think we've got a real player here. Arsenal fans online, I don't know what to make of this because the sample size and stuff, they were a bit like he's rubbish. Maybe they're just feeling a bit bitter about it since they're our feeder club.
I know that they were much more vexed to lose Obi than Heaven.
Yeah.
I think I've probably, and that's what we've seen, probably been more impressed with Heaven actually than Obi, which isn't to say I don't think Obi will be good.
He's a couple of years older as well.
But also, it's probably not a coincidence that they've signed both of them. Surely, and I think Obi, when he signed, said something like Agent Obi on Insta or whatever.
Right, yeah.
But they will at least have said, do you think this guy that marked you in training every day has any use?
Yeah.
That is a conversation that must surely have happened. And he must surely have said yes. Which isn't like the long and short of it, because who's the best player Obi's ever played against? Until, I mean, probably fucking Calvin Bassey now, but until then, who was it?
Yeah.
So we have to contextualize this made-up conversation that I've just made. This conversation that I've just made up. But
very Richard Keys days, isn't it?
Oh, it was Andy Gray. Someone on Twitter,
Andy Gray, that's it.
Someone or other did a great compilation of Andy Gray talking to himself and imagining conversations. And he said, "God, stick that one away, son." And he said, "Oh, thank you very much. Don't mind if I do." And he said, "Yeah, like that kind of stuff." It feels he has the look, I would say, of a good player. that he's someone you can tell by the way he plays that he thinks he's good, and that is part of it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to like about him. I mean, we've seen him for 45 minutes and 10, 15, 20 minutes the other day. I forget how long it was. And initial first impressions are good. We've had quite a few players down the years that look good. I mean, Axel Tuanzebe looked brilliant against Kylian Mbappe in the Champions League. Cameron Borthwick-Jackson and Van Gaal.
Gosh, I remember he was so thin, him.
Tyler Blackett. Well, Cameron Borthwick-Jackson was the guy who just sat there chilled while West Ham fans were trying to destroy United's bus. And he was just like, yeah, couldn't give a fuck. Yeah, coolest man on the bus.
I think he's from Bradford, isn't he? Like Darnish.
Yeah.
I mean, what Van Gaal would play, Van Gaal would just play any of these young players, and it just didn't matter how shit they were. Like Paddy McNair. There was that back three at Arsenal that had Paddy McNair, Tyler Blackett, and I can't remember who the third centre-back was. Maybe Smalling. But... Was it 2-1 we win at Arsenal in that first year of Van Gaal? And he gets rid of Michael Keane.
Mm-hmm.
I have a choice between Michael Keane and Blackett. And I mean, Keane's not a United player, but having had him having been around this period would have been better probably than not being around. Definitely better than Blackett, where is Blackett now? I mean, who even knows?
I think did he go to MLS? He played at Reading and then went to MLS. Something like that. I should totally forget. I may be making that up. Yeah. Anyway, I think there's a fair amount to like about Ayden Heaven. He's obviously got to play more games than this for us to make a proper judgment. But it says something back to our original conversation about the money, about United's strategy. So we've got Obi, Ayden Heaven, Kone, all like £1 million each around about. Oh, actually, Obi was less, Ayden Heaven a little bit more. They are going to focus on younger players with high potential and lower risk in order to try and get themselves out of this PSR problem for the next 2 years. And if they can pick up the right guys, great. It's a hell of a risk, of course, if you're starting to integrate them into the team, that they just won't perform every week. There's the left back, Diego Leon, as well, who's coming in the summer, fits into the same category. The bench yesterday, I mean, this is partly down to a lot of injuries, was full of youngsters. No, will it work? I don't know. Can it be worse than the current pile of crap that we've had this season? Probably not. Could it be worse than this? Not sure it could be.
Yeah, one of the ways of making this period not unbearable is that. And obviously the risk is that you play players that aren't good enough, that weren't ever going to be good enough, and that will make things worse. Or the players that might be good enough, but chucking them into this shit show will make them less good forever or for a while. But these players, they look like Heaven looks ready. I don't know what to say. I mean, it was only one game, but it was in a rear guard against a team with good players. He looked ready. And the other times he's come on, he hasn't had too much to do. But again, he's looked okay. And the first question is, do we even have options but to play him in the next game? But
not really. I mean, Harry Maguire, it looks like he's not out for too long. Yoro, they said he might be ready for Real Sociedad on Thursday, so that's good. Martinez, did he say
he's out for the season?
He's out for the season. Yeah,
he's out for the season. So then, if you say, what you do know is that if you play a back three, the lads on either side have got to be strong and fast, and we know that Yoro and Heaven both are.
Yeah.
Now, whether they're good enough defenders, whether the temperament is there, we sort of know that Yoro has a good temperament. We see that is or at least he's had one previously. But if they have those physical capabilities, are they both good on the ball? Yes. Are they mentally the right kind? Apparently so. So really, it comes down to sort of more matters of defensive nous at this point, because the other stuff appears to be there.
And they are both young forward defenders. Yeah, Yoro had that really difficult game against Southampton, didn't he, where they doubled up on him. But I think he's responded really well to that. He's had a few good games in a row now. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it won't be every day that he faces someone who could beat him in a race from behind, which was what happened with Sulemana, that he was able to push the ball into space. And it was also a structural situation, I think, that they didn't expect that to happen. So there was no prepared antidote for that. And the wide centre-back, I don't think, gave him much help, or the midfielder, whoever it was, or both. So I'm certain that Yoro has come off that pitch and thought, Jesus, that wasn't good. And it says it in the interview with Rio that I mentioned a few weeks ago. He's got his own personal analyst. He will, I'm sure, I don't know what the answer to this is, because I was watching it and I felt, if that was De Ligt, I know that De Ligt is much slower than Yoro, but if he was in that position, I don't think he would have found it as difficult, because I think that he'd have found workarounds. He's a more experienced player who, as a matter of course, has to deal with not being as fast as whoever the attacker happens to be. And it felt like a game that we won, but probably a good learning experience for Yoro too, because I'm not sure we'll see that happen again.
I think he's learning. I think he will. He seems like the personality. I mean, not knowing him, obviously, but it seems like the personality that he kind of took that in stride. He hasn't shrunk from the task in the last few games. He responded well. So, can we talk about someone who's absolutely rubbish, and that if we binned him off, United would instantly be superior on the pitch, and that's Bruno Fernandes, who's contributed absolutely nothing.
Shit.
He's so bad. What? There was a lot of fuss afterwards. The Sky Sports reporter, who's also on the World feed, asked Mikel Arteta 3 times in a row, was the wall correctly placed? Sky Sports measured it at 11.2 yards, apparently, rather than 10. Was that the moment that caused Arsenal to lose the title, as so many Arsenal fans online seem to be talking about? They were robbed because the wall was slightly further back than it should have been.
I mean, in fairness, they asked Ericsson about it on Sky afterwards, and they said, "What do you think of Bruno's free kick?" was to that effect, and he goes, "Well, considering the wall was about 15 meters away, but still, it was good." So he said that he could see at the time that, but it wasn't just that; it was the position of the keeper. I had to go to a funeral, so I was watching it on delay. And when I saw the free kick, I said to myself, if I was not watching this on delay, I would be putting money on Bruno Fernandes to score the next goal. It looks like that's a big gap, that the ball, it doesn't have to be in the corner. And
it wasn't in the corner either.
It wasn't close to the corner. It looks like you could just float that in. But fair fucks to Bruno, probably didn't aim for the corner. His free kicks have actually, in general, been a bit of a disappointment, his set pieces, I think. But he scored 2 free kicks in the last, 3 weeks, is it? Delivery from dead balls getting better as well. So big up. Hold tight, Bruno Fernandes. I mean, he was presented with an opportunity and he dealt with it. And there was a free kick that they had towards the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Where the same thing happens. And their lad did not score. It's not it's not as though, this is now a tap-in because of that. There's still shit to do. And one of them, I think it was Declan Rice, maybe, I can't remember, was complaining that, no, it wasn't Declan Rice. He was actually quite adult about it. That it passes just over the head. So if the wall was in the right place, it would have hit them in the head. And it's just like, well, what if he just hit it a bit higher then?
Yeah, exactly.
He's tailored what he's done to what is.
Yeah.
It was quite funny, actually, when they get that one late on. And because United are shuffling forward, which they don't do. And you can see that Garnacho's the draft excluder. And he's also sort of shoveling himself forward. It's like the scene, are you familiar with the Blues Brothers?
Yeah.
There's a scene in the Blues Brothers where they're talking to the Fat Penguin, and they're sitting on those chairs that have the desks on the arm, and she makes them come closer. I want to look into your faces, and they shuffle forward on those chairs, and it sort of reminded me a bit of that. But yeah, Bruno. I mean, also it's not just the goals and the assists that Bruno Fernandes is giving at the moment. He's playing really well too. He didn't start the season well. This kind of happened last season as well. He wasn't that good at the beginning when it was dreadful. And then he became very good and carried us to a cup pretty much on his own.
I think a lot of them are knackered, which I worry about. He's playing so much football, Bruno Fernandes. He could do with a week off. He will get, actually, they'll all get 2 weeks off because we're out of the cup. So after the Leicester game, I think there's like 2 weeks basically until the next game. So they'll get some rest, although I'm sure Big Sir Jim will find a friendly we could play in Malaysia or something like that.
What do you mean? We get to work in the canteen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, dearie me. All right. Well, what did you think before we get onto Real Sociedad? What did you think of Declan Rice shushing the Old Trafford crowd when he scored? What was that all about? Shush what?
It was a bit. I mean, he did celebrate extremely wildly, given the circumstance. It was a good goal. Good finish.
Good goal, yeah.
But, mate, it's 1-1, and you're about to not win the league again. and you were brought to make that happen. So here we are. Yeah, it was a bit odd. But back to United, I tell you, I thought Mazraoui played well yesterday.
Yeah, actually, I've said it before. I don't like him in those wide wing back positions because I don't think he's athletic enough. But somehow he got some extra energy yesterday. He just seemed to be everywhere.
I think he's an intelligent footballer, and he's learning.
Yeah,
he's learning how to play that role in this system, and he's not just fucking turning up and playing the same game every time like Diogo Dalot, who was brilliantly dreadful yesterday. Like the ball that he runs into touch, Fellaini against Bayern style, was good.
Oh God, yeah.
And the cross that he thwacks somewhere towards Selhurst Park.
Mind you, he did put in a great cross for Mazraoui, didn't he? Earlier in the game, before that.
And that yeah. And I tell you, I also enjoyed that because that was something we used to see from Liverpool when under Klopp, like fullback to fullback, because that's how this system is meant to work. Like, you shouldn't be surprised to see a wing back crossing for a wing back because they're meant to be forward thinking. And that in the second half, the way that we countered, because it's not just the fact that we did, it's that the football was clever and fast and intricate and confident. And these are not things that we say about Manchester United these days.
Not very often.
And we know, because we've seen it with all these managers, that when you've got attackers who are good, and ultimately we do still have, even though we don't think most of them are the level, they're not. Xerxes, not a donkey. It's not how on earth did this guy even become a footballer. I don't think you're athletic enough and physical enough for this, but I know you can play. And so when there's space, we're seeing that they're getting better at using it. And we've said it before, that Ole fell apart when he tried to go more attacking because didn't really have the defender. It sort of coincided with that post-Euros drop from Shaw and Maguire in particular, although Wan-Bissaka hadn't been and was still shit. And it didn't quite work, and then Ten Hag did it, and he tried to do it by signing Mason Mount and playing him in a 3 with Bruno and Casemiro, which is, even cunts like us knew that was stupid at the time. So no one's quite been able to go from effective on the counter to effective when it comes to dominating. And what we've seen with Almiron, we've seen a few games where we're able to control possession, but we're not able to create. And now we've seen a game here where we're able to counter well, and it's finding a way to marry the two where we can do both. And he knows that this isn't good enough. The question is, as you said, whether, and he keeps saying that, and whether he can get there in the end.
He knows, and he keeps saying it. He said we can't play in a low block. It won't be like this. Okay, but he's likely going to have to sign different players in order to do it. And
that's the plan, isn't it? And
that's the plan, and it's going to be a challenge.
There have been reports that Manu wants to go. Now, maybe it's
negotiation.
Maybe it's just negotiation. But yeah. It still feels to me like he's going to be the loser here in this system. In general, I'm not a fan of 3 at the back. I don't like it. Not very many good teams in history have played that way and won this thing worth having while playing that way. There are a few. I think Germany did it in maybe Germany do it in 1990? I think they may have done.
Yeah.
Chelsea under Conte won the league. But I think one of the reasons I'm prepared to accept it is because we've got to try something. And this guy ticks all my boxes apart from that one, so let's see. But also the way that he wants to play it is so that it's not that you're constantly outnumbered all over the pitch, which is my problem with 3-4-3, that I feel like you're going to get outnumbered wide and you're going to get outnumbered in the middle as well. That's not meant to happen. But I keep saying this, to facilitate it, you really need 2 proper physical specimens in the 2 in midfield. And Manu's growing, but can he get about the pitch fast enough? Can he win the ball fast enough? And also, is that what he does well? And the answer to all of those questions seems like no, maybe, but probably no, I'd say. So I still worry for his future at United under this manager. But I guess I like enough of what I see from this manager that I feel able to support him at this point.
I would hope that the club would think longer term, and they'll be going, okay, Maine's young player, we've got to sort out our wage structure. That means not giving players with their first big contract top wages, and so the offer will be much less than the reported ask, for sure, and they're going to find out if they can meet in the middle. But the long-term thinking is not just about the wage structure, it's also about, like, are we going from manager to manager? Are we thinking about our squad building over time? And this is a good test, isn't it? Like, do we think good players can thrive and Amorim can adapt what he does to the players, or do we have to buy 11 players that can fit into his system in order for this to work? Because that worries me, that we do that and then it doesn't work out with him for whatever reason, and in 2 years' time we're buying another 11 players for a manager who has a completely different system, and that's obviously the concern, and the one that Wilcox, who's now effectively the director of football, really has to focus on, and Vivell on the recruitment side. Like, can they bring in players who are multifunctional, but also with Mainu, multifunctional player, can you find a place for him in the squad at the right kind of price? So that would be all right. Part of the thinking around buying players is going to be United's place or not place in the Champions League, which makes a home tie against Real Sociedad quite important.
Dickheads. Oh, yeah.
Bruno into the top corner for a segue.
Oh.
And I know it's ridiculous. It is ridiculous and hyperbolic, but basically every game in the Europa League until we win in Bilbao in May is a £100 million game. So United should beat Real Sociedad. They were crap, honestly. I mean, United weren't brilliant away, but they're not a particularly good side. We should beat them at Old Trafford. It's just winning at Old Trafford is quite a problem these days.
Yeah, I was quite surprised by how fucking wank they were, I must say. At least I thought they'd get after us. Like, start the game and get after us, because it's known that we don't start well. Confidence is low, crowd at home. And actually, it just totally wasn't like that. I couldn't believe how shit they were.
Really bad. They were missing Zubimendi.
Is he going to be back?
There, but I think so. Yeah.
Zubi means Willie in Hebrew, incidentally.
Nice. Great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, that's like kind of every time I think about it, I'm like, oh, Cotton Mendy.
Well, you get a football podcast and Duolingo on this one. Good stuff.
The neediest app in the world, like constantly. My daughter's doing it, and they're just constantly battering you for interaction and to be noticed.
Yeah, it's gamified, fully gamified, isn't it? So my son's doing Spanish at the moment, and it's like, constantly ping, ping, ping. I guess that's what the kids need. What do we think is going to happen this one? Yeah, I'd have to win, but we've got 120 minutes to win this game. Away goals don't mean anything. 120 minutes to win the game. Surely we can put this lot away.
You would think. I mean, someone pointed out to me this morning that, I think he listens, so thank you for this league. Pointed out that we've got 7 games? No, 6 games from here to win Europa. There's not a chance that Onana's not going to fuck us in one of them.
Oh, man.
And now I feel quite relaxed about it, actually. Like, initially I thought, oh, you fucking arsehole. Why'd you? And now I'm like, actually, that makes a lot of sense. And so if it doesn't work out, then for whatever reason, then it doesn't work out. And I mean, it happens in that 2004 season where we weren't the best team in Europe, but Porto won it. We were good enough to win it because Porto did. And they beat Monaco in the final. But our 2 goalkeepers were Roy Carroll and Tim Howard. Of course, one of them fucked us.
Of course.
And the Lino. It's just inevitable. Right, but if it hadn't, then are we seriously able to win the Champions League against anyone with one of them 2? And I guess what I'm beginning to think about Onana, because he was at Inter and did so well, and I knew he was a bit untidy because I've seen actually more of him at Ajax than I had at Inter. But where I'm thinking, is it the pressure of playing for United that's bothering you? And that's why we're seeing these insane errors, that if he made as many errors for Inter that he made for us, he would not be with us. He
wouldn't be in the side. Yeah.
We wouldn't have bought him. And I think that, and also I think that about the passing. And if it is that, then the more serious it gets in the Europa, the more likely he is to jigger us.
He palmed one into the centre. He did his usual thing of
he did
making a save right into the centre against Arsenal as well, which didn't result in a goal. But yeah, I was looking at that going, oh, Christ, again. Yeah, he's going to save up that error until the 93rd minute. Yeah. And we were playing Lazio in the final or whatever. And yeah, he'll palm one right into the path of someone to put one in, and that'll screw us. Like, while Dave is having a worldie of a season at Fiorentina at the moment.
So yeah, I mean, it does feel like at some point in 6 games that might happen, but I mean, we should beat Sociedad. I mean, they're fucking rubbish.
Yeah.
But so are we.
They are one game at a time. We are rubbish, but they are rubbisher, and we're at home. All right, I guess we leave it there. Fan protests, draw against Arsenal, which felt pretty positive. £100 million game on Thursday. Top stuff, Daniel.
Oh, chorus.